Baby Doll by Sandra Kiss. Narrated by Kitty M. Clay. To everyone who has lost a loved one, their other half. If I were to kiss you, then go to hell, I would. So then I can brag with the devils I saw heaven without ever entering it. William Shakespeare. Chapter 1. I was spinning to the last notes of music before collapsing backwards onto the couch. A quick glance at my watch told me it was already 11 o'clock at night. I was starting to feel the fatigue. Once again, my two best friends, Alba and Penelope, twin sisters who loved to party at student gatherings, swept me along. As I caught my breath amid the general bustle, my brain, as usual, raced. I thought about the upcoming exams in my final year of high school and my plans to pursue art studies at university. Slowly, my mind drifted away. Gradually, the voices and noise around me faded. My invisible alter ego, whom I nicknamed Beto, whispered in my ear,
"Why don't we move abroad to enhance our artistic skills?"
Leaving Seville scared me, but it was also inspiring. I had always lived comfortably with the privileges of my social status. Although I enjoyed this life, I dreamed of escape. Beto was everything I was not, cheeky, visionary, and he thirsted for freedom. Each morning, he would wake me up loudly to remind me I needed to fight to achieve my dreams. I constantly had to silence him to keep him quiet. The couple settling next to me snapped me back to the present. I sat up abruptly. My eyes swept the room, searching for my two friends. I first spotted their red hair in the middle of the crowd. They were surrounded by people and seemed to be having the time of their lives, laughing and dancing to the rhythm of the music. The party was in full swing at Pablo's large house, the son of a wealthy businessman. He had invited the cream of Seville's youth, unconcerned about the noise or damage. The house was tastefully decorated, yet unpretentious. Comfortable sofas and low tables were arranged in the living room, where trays of tapas and bottles of wine were available for guests. I turned my face towards the bay window. In the garden, a pool shimmered under the stars, surrounded by loungers and umbrellas. Couples were kissing discreetly there, enjoying the cool night air. It was time for me to leave. I got up and made my way through the crowd, nodding to acquaintances as I passed. Alba and Penelope smiled as they saw me approaching. They were nearly identical physically, both sprinkled with freckles and their hazel eyes usually twinkling with mischief. Same height, same figure. The only difference between them was their haircuts. Alba had a short bob, while Penelope wore her thick, long hair down her back.
"Hey, Melia, having fun?"
Alba asked, throwing an arm around my shoulders. "Yes, but it's time for me to go." My friend sighed.
"It's the weekend. You can stay another hour or two."
"Want something to drink?"
Penelope offered, extending a cup to me. "No thanks. I'm not thirsty."
"Are you sure?"
She persisted. I nodded and scanned the room.
"Well, seen anyone you like?"
Alba asked with a wink. I tilted my head, a small smile on my lips. The girls never missed a chance to play matchmakers. Alba's eyes held a hint of hilarity. I rolled my eyes. No.
"Come on, Melia, don't be shy. There are plenty of good-looking guys here. You should enjoy yourself,"
Penelope advised. I crossed my arms. I can't enjoy if I don't get home on time.
"What? You're not going to leave us now?"
Alba protested.
"Okay, I have an idea. Why don't you text your mom that you're staying over with us?"
"Anyway, your parents are hardly ever home."
Penelope chimed in, clasping her hands together to plead with me. "Impossible. I remind you that my parents enforce a curfew because of the riots that broke out in the city at the start of the week." Penelope feigned surprise.
"Riots? What riots?"
At that moment, Pablo's best friend joined the conversation.
"Oh, but that doesn't concern us. We're safe here, far from those rough neighborhoods."
The young man dismissed with a radiant smile. Antonio, 18, was the type of popular, arrogant, and confident boy. I found him pretentious. He took pleasure in belittling, ridiculing shy students who didn't meet society's beauty standards. He was not a good person. I couldn't understand why he attracted so much attention from girls. Of course it concerns us. A student died under police blows. It's horrific. Surprised by my words, Antonio raised an eyebrow. He looked at me as if I belonged in an asylum.
That Cabron was a thug. Drug dealers never live long. The riots in those areas will calm down eventually. I bet by Monday we won't hear about it anymore.
I was about to say something else, but Penelope intervened.
Melia was about to leave. She's the only one here respecting the curfew. Maybe you could walk her home?
I almost screamed at how surprised I was by my friend's suggestion. I turned my head towards her with wide eyes. Antonio shrugged, then let his leering gaze drift over me.
Of course. I like to help out pretty young women. Plus, it'll give us a chance to get to know each other.
A dark anger welled up inside me. I had no desire to end my evening with this guy.
I'll bring the car around. See you in a minute.
He turned on his heel and left before I had a chance to respond. I faced to my friends, a forced smile fixed on my lips. You realize this ride with him is going to be hell. Penelope threw her head back and spread her arms, struggling to keep her balance, drunk as she was.
You're exaggerating. Antonio is handsome, rich, popular. There are worse guys to lose your virginity to, I assure you.
I gave her an inquisitive look, my lips pinched in anger. Instead of contradicting her sister, Alba giggled.
It's your fault, Melia. You're so predictable. If you didn't lock yourself into this role of the perfect old maid, we wouldn't have to play Cupid. We only want what's best for you.
My best? With Antonio? That sounds more like a punishment. I checked my watch again. It was too late to back out now. The thought of being grounded quickly overshadowed all my other concerns. I'm off, I told my friends as I tossed my long black hair back. See you tomorrow for lunch. I blew them a kiss before disappearing into the crowd.
En cambio de decir, él me encanta, yo lo quiero, pues dímelo a mí, que no me hago daño.
Chapter 2. Facing the half-lowered window, I tried to ignore Antonio's voice and remarks. The night was cool. The full moon shining above Seville bathed the sky in a soft glow and cast a hypnotic light. The ride could have been enjoyable if my neighbor hadn't put all his energy into distracting me.
You know, you look very beautiful tonight, Ortega,
he said with unwavering confidence. I sighed and turned toward him.
I'm not interested, Antonio.
Come on, why don't you try to get to know me? Many girls would dream of being in your place right now. Don't be shy.
My voice grew louder and a certain irritation was detectable.
You're wasting your time. I assure you. I just want to go home.
His eyes fixed on the road. A strange smirk formed at the corner of his mouth as if he didn't believe me. The car crawled along the freeway. Antonio wanted to prolong the journey. I was seething inside.
All right, sweetheart. I'll take you home.
Sweetheart? Increasingly annoyed and nervous. I felt trapped. I looked out the window again, hoping Antonio had gotten the message. That's when he shifted toward me and placed his hand on my thigh. Furious, I pushed it away harshly.
What's your problem? I'm not interested. There's nothing appealing about you, so cut it out.
Antonio raised his hand above his head, visibly upset, his eyes gleaming with anger. The car sped up. With a nasty tone, he burst out,
You think you're better than everyone else. Anyway, you're not even my type.
That's perfect. I'll take that as a compliment coming from you.
He swerved to the right before abruptly stopping the car at the roadside. I lurched forward so violently that the stop was jarring.
Get out, you little brat.
Stunned, it was enough to spark the flame that ignited my rage.
What did you say?
Get out of my car!
Antonio screamed furiously.
Cabron, you!
Before I could finish my sentence, he grabbed my bag with an impatient gesture and threw it through my window. Furious, I stormed out of the vehicle, hurling insults at him. Antonio leaned over and slammed the door. The tires screeched as he sped away. I kicked at the air.
Go fuck yourself!
My cry of fury was so intense it tore through my chest. I stood on the side of the road, alone and furious. After a few seconds, I quickly recognized the neighborhood. This can't be happening. He actually left me here, I roared. I was still too far from home to walk back. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe calmly. Air started flowing back into my lungs as my pulse gradually returned to normal. When I opened my eyes again, I saw my bag spilled on the ground, with my belongings scattered all over the sidewalk. I rushed to gather them up, praying my phone wasn't broken. Luckily, the screen had survived the fall. I pressed the power button, but it shut off immediately, displaying low battery. I let out a desperate groan before tossing it back into my bag and stood up, looking around again. The place was far from downtown and not accessible to pedestrians. Cars and bikes sped by, none stopping. No taxis or buses in sight. I was going to have to hitchhike for the first time in my life. This evening was turning into a real nightmare. With my thumb raised, I felt vulnerable. I hoped not to encounter someone worse than Antonio. A dozen and then 20 cars passed by without stopping. Growing more anxious, I began to feel despair deep inside. Just as I was about to give up, the flash of headlights suddenly renewed my hope. A red sports car slowed down a few meters ahead of me before pulling over and waiting a bit further on. Without wasting a moment, I started running towards the Camaro. Squinting, I moved closer to the window and made out a feminine silhouette in the dim light. Relieved, I let out a sigh.
Damn! What are you doing out here alone at this hour?
The young woman bluntly asked, as if we had known each other forever. I opened the door and settled in beside her. I'm wondering that myself, I replied in a surly tone. Turning my head towards her, I could now clearly see her face covered in piercings. She had them on her eyebrows, nose, mouth, cheeks, ears. Her green hair, pulled up into 2 high ponytails, gave her an even more rock and roll look. Long black strokes of eyeliner framed her piercing green eyes. A shiver ran down my spine. After Antonio, I was meeting Harley Quinn. This couldn't be real. The evening was getting crazier and crazier.
Tell me where to drop you off.
My gaze dropped to her lips, which were also painted black. An amused smile formed on them. I looked away and cleared my throat before mumbling, Triana. The Camaro started. I relaxed my shoulders and rested the back of my head on the seat before giving my exact address to my neighbor. We had barely driven a few meters when I decided, out of politeness, to break the silence. I thought I was going to have to walk home. Thanks. My name's Melyana. My neighbor simply nodded in response. With furrowed brows, she was focused on the road. Her driving mirrored her car, sporty. Clutching the door handle, I continued my monologue to focus on something other than the speed at which we were moving. I'm a senior. Tonight's party was supposed to help us unwind before exams, but that cabron Antonio ruined everything. And to top it off, I'll probably be grounded until I start university. My neighbor let out a small laugh.
The word punishment only exists for you rich kids. Your parents love to overprotect you so much you don't know what to do when you find yourself stranded on the side of a road.
Our parents just want what's best for us, Where are you from?
Los Pajaritos.
Los Pajaritos, the neighborhood where riots had broken out a few days earlier. I turned my head to look through my window and recognized the colorful facades of the houses, the flowered balconies. I wasn't far from home.
I guess you've never been to this side of town,
she asked in a calm yet ironic tone. I looked straight ahead again and shook my head. I don't know every neighborhood in Seville, I replied, uncomfortable.
You mean the poor neighborhoods?
Instinctively, I pushed my hair back before responding as courteously as possible. I don't have any family or friends from this side of town. The young woman turned towards me and sized me up from head to toe before returning her gaze to the road.
No surprise there. Little rich girls like you wouldn't last a day in this part of town. To be honest, I pity lives ruled by your parents.
Shocked by her aggressive words, I widened my eyes. The anger I had been holding back since the incident with Antonio threatened to burst. You're wrong. I am in control of my destiny. Contrary to what you think, I am completely free. My neighbor let out a derisive laugh.
And what is your destiny? What do you like to do in life?
I responded as if whipped. Draw, create. I love art. The young woman theatrically nodded her head and then laughed again.
So your parents are okay with you pursuing your passion without any pressure?
That's right, I lied. And they support me. At that moment, the car slowed down. We had arrived at my destination.
Nice place. I hope Mom and Dad won't be too mad about you coming home so late.
With a fiery glare, I thanked her and grabbed my bag. Suddenly, without warning, she interrupted my motion by firmly grabbing my arm. Her eyes were fixed on my sketchbook, half protruding from my belongings.
Can I?
She asked, suddenly serious. With furrowed brows, I freed myself with all the tact I could muster at that moment, and hesitated for a second. They're just some doodles, I cautioned on guard.
I work at a tattoo parlor. I know talented doodling when I see it.
The expression on her face had changed. Hand outstretched, she seemed almost pleading to see the sketchbook. To be honest, she was actually the first person to show real interest in what truly excited me in life. I handed her my sketchbook with a hesitant gesture. Silent, she studied my sketches with intense concentration. The seconds dragged on, interminable, in the heavy silence. I was so late.
This is good. Really good.
The young woman murmured. She flipped through the pages as if mesmerized. There were landscapes, portraits, objects.
Are these freehand?
I nodded.
Mierda. They're perfect. You have talent.
With those 3 words, this stranger had lit up my dark world, one that remained hidden from everyone else. Thank you, I said timidly in a low voice. My neighbor lifted her eyes and gave me a thoughtful, cool green gaze.
Melyana, right? I'm Lindsay. Don't let anyone crush your dreams. Promise.
I furrowed my brows, surprised by her sudden interest in these drawings and the power they had over her. I'll try, I replied, more melancholically than I intended. The young woman handed back the sketchbook. I hurriedly stuffed it into my bag and got out of the car. Once outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. Little did I know at that moment this encounter would soon change my life.
You know it still hurts a little bit, but not that
Chapter
bad.
3.
'Cause if you want somebody else, who am I to judge?
That Saturday morning, I woke up with a headache and a bitter taste in my mouth. Lying in my bed, I scanned the walls adorned with my own creations, drawings that depicted my inner world. Brushes and pencils cluttered the shelf above my desk. I closed my eyes, inhaled the delicate scent of pastels, then reopened them to check the time on my phone. 9:30 a.m. I hesitated for a moment to call the girls before quickly deciding against it. Alba and Penelope were probably still sleeping. Knowing them, they must have stayed late at Pablo's party. My mother's voice floated up from the living room. I took a deep breath. As a lawyer, she often worked late on her cases and had waited up for me last night. Worried, she had pounced on me asking why I hadn't kept to our agreed time. The police roadblocks delayed us. It's harder to get around on weekend nights in the city because of the riots. My phone was out of battery. I'm sorry, Mom. Fortunately, my father was on duty at the hospital. Relieved, my mother had accepted this explanation, which seemed reasonable. I didn't like lying to my parents. I still felt guilty about it this morning. I wasn't sure if I was protecting them or Antonio's family, with whom they had very good business relations. I got up painfully from my bed and headed to the bathroom. When my gaze met my reflection in the mirror, I grimaced. My long, tousled black hair, dark ringed eyes, and mascara smudged below made me look like a depressed clown. After a quick shower, I felt a bit better. I hoped my mother had already left the house so I wouldn't have to face her a second time. But no, she was there, pacing in the living room, probably on the phone with a client. Very serious. She looked busy, as usual. Dressed in her sleek, refined black suit, she radiated confidence and class. She was a renowned lawyer, a shark who never let go of her prey. She wielded influence over many except my father. As a surgeon, he was seldom at home. I barely saw him. With deliberate slowness, my mother lifted her brown eyes to meet mine. I waved at her to say hello. Focused on her conversation, she regarded me with a hostile expression for a moment, then gestured for me to sit at the table for breakfast. I sighed. As I started eating, I watched my mother talk about contracts, clauses, and procedures. Unperturbed, she seemed passionate about her work. Would I also be able to be passionate later on, choosing the path my parents had set for me? How could we be so different? How could we understand each other without ever really talking? Preoccupied, I hadn't realized my mother had hung up the phone.
Melyana, are you listening to me?
She asked, irritated. I apologized. I'm not fully awake yet. What were you saying? A cold expression hardened her features. Standing before me, she pretended to tidy her bun before resting a hand on her hip.
You're young. It's normal that you think about having fun. But you also need to think about your future. What have you decided? You should have been handling your university applications months ago.
She paused, turned her head, and dismissively waved her hand through the air.
I have influence, but if you don't...
I filled out the pre-enrollment forms last week. I cut her off. My first choice is Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. My mother snapped back to me, her relief appearing immense.
Melia, that's such good news. Your father will be so happy to hear this. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I've been losing sleep over it.
You're not often here. My mother pursed her lips. A glint I didn't recognize flickered in her eyes.
That's true. But things are going to calm down a bit. We'll be able to spend more time together soon.
Unusually, she smiled at me, then quickly moved towards the sofa to grab her jacket and bag.
Anyway, I'm glad you've given up that insignificant art idea. It really made no sense. You're 18. You're not a little girl anymore.
A muffled anger rose within me. I took a deep breath to contain it as best as I could. Suddenly, something outside caught her attention. She slowly approached the window.
Damn it! They're still there! I'm going to call the police!
I got up from my seat and joined my mother. The surprise was so great I almost choked.
Holy shit.
I whispered, eyes wide. Across the street was the young woman who had given me a ride the previous day. Sitting on the hood of her red car, she was talking to a man no older than her. Her bright green hair and distinctive appearance were bound to draw all eyes in the neighborhood. From here, I could see her sleeveless black corset revealing her arms covered in tattoos. The metal studs on it gleamed in the sun. The bottom of her ultra-tight jeans disappeared into boots with thick soles, adorned with straps and silver buckles. My mother turned to me, her eyebrows furrowed.
Do you know them? Those people have been there for over 2 hours.
I collected myself. No. Look, go to work. They're probably just waiting for someone. They're not doing anything wrong. My mother sighed, glanced at her watch, then nodded.
I'm late. I'll leave you to handle it.
She turned on her heel and quickly walked away from me.
What's your plan for today?
She called out without turning back. I'm having lunch in town with the girls.
All right. Take care and don't come back late. Your father will be home tonight for dinner.
Before I had time to respond, she had disappeared from the room. 2 minutes later, I found myself outside. I did my best to compose my expression and demeanor before I approached the red Camaro. The sun already shone high in the cloudless sky, warming my skin as I walked. It was unusually hot for the beginning of May.
What are you doing in front of my house?
I asked in a direct and almost accusatory tone. I shoved my hands into the back pockets of my jeans as I waited for a response. Lindsay rolled her eyes skyward while vulgarly chewing gum, then slid off the hood of the car.
I'm asking myself the same question,
muttered the guy next to her. Embarrassed, he quickly glanced around, then lowered his head to avoid my gaze. He was barely taller than me, and, like Lindsay, had the look of a rebel rocker with piercings on his eyebrow, nose, lip, and ears. His black hair styled into a mohawk highlighted his round, chubby face. My eyes scanned his neck and arms tattooed with tribal patterns, skulls, and flames. I continued my scrutiny to his black leather jacket adorned with studs and chains, then to his tight pants and thick-soled boots.
My brother, Josh,
Lindsay introduced.
He's a tattoo artist, too. We work together with my other brother.
On guard, I eyed the young woman from the corner of my eye. The scene was surreal. Had she really come just for this? With an exaggerated smile, I turned to the young man. Pleased to meet you, Josh, I said sarcastically. He scratched the back of his head.
Yeah, I admit it's weird,
he confessed, embarrassed. He turned to his sister and growled between his teeth.
Damn. What are you playing at? She can't be the one we're looking for.
Lindsay glared at him before replying with a grumpy demeanor.
And yet she is. I admit, she doesn't look like much at first, but wait until...
The person you're talking about is right here.
I cut them off, crossing my arms over my chest.
What are you looking for? Who?
The young man grimaced.
We'd like to talk to you about a project,
Lindsay began.
We're looking for someone to complete our team for a competition.
She paused, as if to let the impact of her words sink in. I furrowed my brows, trying to grasp what she was getting at. This conversation was taking such a strange turn. She locked her gaze with mine and stepped forward.
The Tiger Cup is a global event that happens every 10 years. Over 2 days, the world's best tattoo artists compete under the scrutiny of a demanding jury. The winners gain significant renown worldwide. There's no contest or title more prestigious than this one.
I blinked, then suddenly recalled how meticulously she had examined my drawings in my sketchbook yesterday. I shook my head and dropped my arms. Wait, are you asking me to be part of your team?
Seems like it.
Josh replied, as surprised as I was. This is a joke. There are thousands of artists in this country. I'm sure you can find an experienced tattoo artist who would be thrilled to have this experience.
Experience?
Lindsay repeated, deliberately letting out a small, mocking laugh from the back of her throat. Unable to hold back, she was about to retort sharply, but her brother stepped in to diffuse the tension. The young man tried another approach to convince me to join their adventure.
To be honest, we're really short on time. Our teammate bailed last Monday, and registration closes Friday night at 10 p.m. My sister told me she's never seen drawings as realistic and expressive as yours. And I assure you, it takes a lot to impress her. Come to the salon with us and see for yourself.
Lindsay grunted and turned away, her face sullen. Her brother's revelation seemed to bruise her ego. She turned on her heel and headed towards her car.
We're wasting our time. The perfect upbringing of this rich kid keeps her from thinking straight, she scoffed.
To keep from lashing out at her, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath before reopening them. Why did your teammate leave you?
And why would you care?
Lindsay asked, already opening her car door. I merely shrugged in response and then looked at Josh, who answered,
Our brother Diez has a complicated temperament. He's very demanding and tends to push people to their limits.
I couldn't help but let out a small, mocking laugh. Must run in the family, I declared in an unpleasant tone, alluding to Lindsay. She shot me a piercing look, pointing her index finger in my direction. Her brother stepped in front of her to block her from my view and continued.
Diez is a good person. He's just had a tough few years. This competition is a childhood dream of his. It's all he lives for. Lindsay and I want to see him achieve this dream. We're doing all this for him.
A challenging silence followed. With a defiant expression, Lindsay decided to play her last card.
You told me you want to go to art school after high school. Mr. Casas, the director of Alstomia, oversees this event. It would undoubtedly be a boon to your application. Give us a chance to persuade you to experience this. Experience.
Alstomia was one of the most important and prestigious art schools in Europe, and particularly in Spain. At that moment, a mix of resolute will and strange indecision battled in my mind. Driven by instinctive defiance, I convinced myself to take a peek into this world completely different from mine. It's not a yes, but I'm willing to see a bit more as long as it doesn't commit me to anything. A triumphant gleam lit up Lindsay's eyes while Josh breathed more freely. He shook his head as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Without wasting a moment, his sister opened the back door of the Camaro. I'll grab my stuff, I declared, spinning around. As I walked back to the house, I couldn't stop wondering what I was getting myself into. If my parents found out what I was doing, they would certainly disown me. Chapter 4. Sitting in the back of the car, I gazed at the sky, painted in warm golden hues. We drove with the windows down through the narrow streets towards an unknown destination. The city still bore remnants of the Real de la Feria, the spring festival that had taken place in Seville 2 weeks earlier. Colorful lanterns and flowers adorned the facades of historic buildings. The air was fragrant with the smells of fried food, Iberian ham, and manzanilla. Silence reigned in the Camaro, broken only by the sound of traffic outside and the wheels on the cobblestones. That was fine by me. I had no desire to make conversation with these two strangers. Lost in my thoughts, I preferred simply to watch the scenery go by. I wasn't nervous. I was just eager to get this over with. The situation I found myself in was the result of a series of completely unexpected events. But fortunately, it was all about to end. The car slowed down, turned into an alley, and stopped at the very end in front of a storefront decorated with unsettling designs. I got out of the vehicle and was quickly joined by Lindsay and her brother. This place meant nothing to me. Blaring rock music poured out from it. I looked around. The alley was quiet, with no foot traffic. The urge to turn back overwhelmed me. I almost did. But then Lindsay taunted me again.
Look at her, Josh. She's about to call her mommy.
Damn it, Lindsay. Leave her alone. You're the one who went after her.
The young man approached me, his eyes filled with compassion.
Melyana, if you appreciate art, you'll like this place more than you think.
My eyes returned to the display window. The patterns, as brutal as they were delicate in somber colors, drew me in. There was something poetic about this abstract mural. I took a deep breath and tried to convince myself Lindsay's opinion didn't matter to me. If I was pushing the door of this shop, it was only because I wanted to be left alone for good.
Melia, you're so predictable.
Penelope's voice echoed in my head as I crossed the threshold of this unusual salon. If the girls could see me now, their jaws would surely drop. And even if I told them everything, they wouldn't believe me. Suddenly, my thoughts were abruptly interrupted. The dark, intimate atmosphere of the place swept my legs out from under me and took my breath away. My gaze immediately wandered to the paintings on the walls, displaying original creations, realistic portraits, and fantastical landscapes. They looked like works of art. Blocking out everything around me, I slowly approached the paintings. Lost in the contemplation of these drawings, I couldn't hear Lindsay or Josh's voices. I was mesmerized. My eyes roamed the wall, captivated by the perfect outline of each piece. The noise of the music blaring at full volume quickly brought me back to the present moment. I continued to look around. In this modest space, there was a black velvet couch, a stack of magazines on a table, and a counter with plenty of storage at the back. More surprisingly, a small library corner had been set up where shelves were filled with books. The top shelf was occupied by a vast collection of vinyl records. Finally, my gaze settled on the green plants in the corner of the room. Well, this place was full of surprises. The music suddenly softened. I turned towards the counter. Josh, near a vintage hi-fi system, had been busy turning down the noise of the bass and electric guitar blaring from the speakers. I gave him a small smile before he turned to his sister.
Diez must be preparing for his next appointment. Shall we go?
No choice,
she retorted, her expression serious and worried. I stood still for a second, slightly disoriented, before following them into the adjacent room. The door opened onto a space even darker than the entrance. A warm, masculine scent filled the air, redolent with notes of sandalwood. My eyes swept over the shiny black floor and the low ceiling, finally settling on a brown leather chair in the center of the room. That's where I saw him, standing behind a large metal table, manipulating various objects and products. A bit older than me, he had thick black hair styled into a messy pompadour. Dressed all in leather as well, he seemed to have stepped right out of the rock and roll era of the 1950s.
Diez, we need to talk,
Lindsay exclaimed. I stayed near the door and took a discreet breath, the moment feeling oppressive. The young man, unfazed, continued to tend to his equipment without looking up.
Hurry up. I've got a busy day ahead.
The trail of his gravelly, deep voice penetrated me. An unsettling, tingling sensation ran up my spine. His words lingered in the air, as heavy as the silence that had fallen in the room. Lindsay continued.
We've found our teammate for the contest,
she declared confidently. The young man half lifted his head. His face remained intensely focused. The black eyeliner under his eyes accentuated the harshness of his gaze, as dark as everything else. The icy glint at the back of his eyes sent a shiver through me. After a quick glance over me, he turned his attention back to his equipment and addressed his sister.
Did Dirk give you the form with his signature? I don't see it in the papers.
Lindsay furrowed her brows and shook her head, looking troubled.
I forgot to ask him for it.
Okay, don't forget to get it this morning. We need it for his file. It's important.
The young woman was clearly not one to gloss over problems. Overwhelmed by her brother's total indifference, she turned to Josh, annoyed.
Can you help me? After all, if we're in this mess, it's because of him. Our idiot brother has scared off half the tattoo artists in Seville. Nobody wants to compete with us.
Diez!
Josh persisted. The young man, still busy, did not respond.
Diez, Lindsay isn't wrong. You should at least give us a few minutes.
Diez's jaw tightened. He removed his gloves and took a deep breath before facing his brother. With a cold and composed voice, he replied sharply,
I told you I'd fix all this.
He then cast a malicious glance at me and added,
There's no way we're just picking anyone. Give me 2 days. At worst, we'll compete in the contest in 10 years.
My gaze flickered before drifting around the room. The vein in my neck pulsed to the rhythm of my distress. What am I doing here? I felt like I was delivered to Mephistopheles, one of the 7 princes of hell, and an unspeakable ordeal awaited me.
Are you kidding?
Lindsay exploded, throwing her arms up.
You've really gotten us into a mess. The contest is in 3 months, and Mandy just bailed on us overnight because you pushed her too far.
Mandy couldn't learn or work under pressure. I spent my time assisting her. For this contest, you need mental strength, and she didn't have it.
Mierda, Diez. She had 3 months to improve and get ready for the Tiger Cup. You gave her no chance.
We don't have time, Lindsay.
Her brother growled, stressing each word.
Wow, what an admission, Diez. Thanks, we didn't know.
The young man pretended to ignore the sarcasm in his sister's words, but it didn't stop her. She continued to pour out her anger.
You could have made an effort to support her until the contest was over.
He couldn't suppress a grimace.
I'm not that kind of guy.
A fake smile crossed Lindsay's lips for a second, before they twisted in sudden fury.
Yes, you are!
She roared, pointing a threatening finger at him.
You excel at playing the role of a man absent from the world. In addition to being indifferent to emotions, your behavior makes you seem arrogant and unapproachable to anyone who might want to get close.
I closed my eyes, trying to turn down the volume of his voice in my ears, but to no avail. My pulse hammered in my temples as my chest tightened more and more. For the 100th time, I wondered what I was doing there. Those minutes felt like an eternity. I opened my eyes and it felt like I had shifted into a parallel world. It was ridiculous and surreal to find myself in the middle of this argument with these 3 strangers. The young man placed his hands flat on the table and growled through his teeth.
We can only enter this contest once in our lifetime. That's the rule. It's out of the question that we blow our chances because of a mommy's girl who's still playing with dolls.
Anger flooded me. I decided to come out of my shell and addressed the demon man in an uncompromising tone.
Well, rest assured, I'd gladly return to my golden bubble where there's human warmth. I'd rather die under torture than be part of this team. It's me saying no.
The young man furrowed his brow and looked at me doubtfully. I struggled to maintain his gaze that burned my eyes. His behavior was so unbearable, I decided to turn on my heels and leave. Lindsay caught up with me just before I crossed the threshold of the tattoo parlor.
Melyana, wait. I'm sorry my brother is such a jerk. He'll change his mind when...
Not me.
I cut her off, turning abruptly toward her.
I didn't come here to be insulted. Handle it yourselves. Besides, I know nothing about tattoos. It's not my thing.
Harley Quinn firmly grabbed my arm, stopping me from opening the door.
Melyana, please.
The rest of her sentence was clear in the green of her pleading eyes and her subdued voice. A strange emotion spread within me. My gaze wandered momentarily to the paintings on the walls before returning to her.
Lindsay, you can't force him.
With a confident tone, she responded with an exaggerated hand gesture.
I'll be the one to train you. Screw him, okay?
My phone in my bag rang at that moment. It was the girls. I have to meet my friends. They're waiting for me for lunch. Lindsay nodded and then shrugged as if it was not a problem.
Okay, let's go. I'll walk you out.
No! I'd rather take an Uber. Thanks. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed Lindsay to understand I did not want to participate in this contest. Stop being stubborn. I let out as I reopened my eyes. My answer is no. You'll find the right person to complete your team. I'm sure of it. Trust your brother. He's right. Holding back from insisting further, she fell silent, overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. Relieved to be in the car taking me to my meeting with the girls, I only started to feel better after several long minutes. Chapter 5. I immediately spotted the girls at the back of the terrace, smiling and radiant in their colorful dresses. My friends were waiting for me at a table. The restaurant was busy at this time of day. The delicious aroma of grilled food wafted through the air. Despite the heat beating down on the city, I was happy to be there. The knot in my stomach had dissolved. I hurried to weave through the tables. If there was one thing I hated, it was being late.
Melyana, you're finally here!
Penelope exclaimed as she saw me. Sorry, I had a bit of a delay. Instead of finishing my sentence, I waved my hand and sat down opposite the girls. What kind of delay? Asked Alba with a curious pout. Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, I thought to myself. I still couldn't believe it myself. The waiter came over, and we ordered tapas and cold drinks to cool off. Hardly had he finished taking our order when Penelope pressed on.
So?
I decided to skip over the shock of the last hour and instead told them about my evening the night before with Antonio. How he had been insistent, and then how he had left me stranded on the side of the road.
What a jerk!
Penelope exclaimed, outraged. Anger in her sister spiked as well.
He deserves to be castrated. I swear, if I run into him, I'll jump on him and beat him up.
A nightmare. I continued, pushing my thick hair back. My phone battery was dead, and I couldn't call anyone. I thought I was going to have to walk home. The waiter returned and placed our drinks and dishes on the table. I quickly took a sip of my fruit cocktail. Keep going, Alba urged, eager to hear more about my misadventure. I responded with a shrug. I hitchhiked. The girl's eyes widened. You did what? Alba exclaimed.
Our Melyana hitchhiked.
Penelope articulated with difficulty, hardly believing me.
But you're crazy.
I threw my hands up in the air. I had no choice. It was either that or get home 2 hours late. I do crazy stuff sometimes. The girls exchanged a sidelong glance that annoyed me. Why did this image of the goody two-shoes stick to me so persistently? Alba grabbed a sandwich from the dish and declared, Luckily, you didn't run into anyone crazier than Antonio. Penelope shook her head vigorously, looking annoyed.
I feel so bad. It's because of us that you ended up in that situation. We should never have pushed you into the arms of that creep.
Antonio isn't dangerous, I declared, taking a vegetable sandwich myself. He's just a big oaf who thinks he can act however he wants because of his popularity in high school. We then moved on to more thrilling topics like shopping. the parties planned after the exam, and how Alba could go about seducing Juan. This light-hearted moment was perfect and took precedence over everything else. As usual, our conversation eventually drifted.
Love is harmful to the heart,
exclaimed Penelope.
Sex, on the other hand, is the antidote to everything.
Alba disagreed. I need to feel something for the person. It's awful when it's just a one-night stand. I get no pleasure from it. Tell her, Melia. Tell her she's wrong. With an ironic smile, Penelope turned to me.
Melia can't have an opinion on this.
I'm a hopeless romantic, I replied, waving my hand in front of her. For me, emotions have to be part of the equation. I want my first time to be with someone who can thrill me just by looking at me. Penelope rolled her eyes.
You're born in the wrong era, darling. Love is dead. Goodness, what world do you live in?
Alba was about to retort, but something stopped her. The gaze of my two friends drifted behind me. Their expression suddenly shifted from carefreeness to astonishment. Intrigued by their stunned silence, I turned around and stiffened immediately. Mierda. My blood rushed to my face when I saw Lindsay approaching us.
Is she looking at us?
Penelope whispered. Melia, it looks like she knows you, added Alba in the same tone. I've never seen a girl with so many tattoos on her body. It must be extremely painful. Growing more nervous, I turned back to the girls and lowered my head. I felt genuinely embarrassed. What was she doing here? I was sure I had finished with that story. I put my glass down on the table. My heart pounded against my temples. Yes, I know her. A bit, I admitted in a low voice. Alba and Penelope were speechless.
Hey, girls.
Lindsay stood next to our table, filling the air with a kind of feverish discomfort. I sighed, discouraged.
So, Melyana, aren't you going to introduce me?
Lindsay pressed. My friends continued to regard her warily. It's true that at first glance, Lindsay projected an image quite out of step with the rest of the population. In this chic and trendy city restaurant, her unique look stood out, but she seemed unbothered by it. Quite the opposite. She enjoyed it. She loved to shock. I was seething inside. What are you doing here? I growled, glancing around.
Why are you so angry? We're friends now, Melyana.
She knows her first name,
Penelope whispered to her sister. Lindsay tried to hide her smile. I remained conspicuously cold, even icy.
Did you follow me?
The young woman simply shrugged in response.
Melia?
Penelope insisted.
We're a bit lost. Can you explain?
Lindsay sat down next to me and answered for me.
I think your friend has told you about the mishaps at the end of her night yesterday. Well, it was me who took her home. Since then, we've been inseparable. Melyana is going to participate in the 5th edition of the world's largest tattoo competition. Of course, I'll be training her. This morning, she came to the salon to meet my brother, Diez. That's why she was late.
Stop!
I yelled. I felt like I was taking another step on the path to madness. This couldn't be happening. I was going to wake up.
I gave you a clear answer,
I declared, emphasizing each of my words, very annoyed.
Diez scared you,
Lindsay replied with a slow, exaggerated smile.
Before that, I came to pick you up this morning with my other brother, and you got in the car to go to the tattoo salon.
I wanted to respond, but Alba silenced me with a gesture. Wait! You want to participate in this tattoo competition? She turned to her sister.
No!
I rushed to correct vehemently.
So cool!
Alba and Penelope exclaimed in unison, without having listened to my response. Excited, Alba carried on. Why didn't you tell us? I thought your life was just going to be one boring event after another. Finally, you managed to surprise us. I narrowed my eyes and pretended to misunderstand her words. Beside her, Penelope was nodding. She evidently shared this view, too.
Great. Thanks, girls. I didn't realize how boring and annoying I was.
Predictable, corrected Alba in a teasing tone.
Tell us about this competition,
her sister urged, barely able to stay seated. I crossed my arms and replied sharply,
There is no competition.
Lindsay, however, was more than happy to continue her charade by answering all their questions and explaining the rules. She compensated for my bad mood by doubling down on smiles. The girls watched her, fascinated by her character. I remained silent. Alba and Penelope would eventually understand that this competition story was something impossible. Too big for me. Then I would revert to being the boring friend they had always known.
The doors to the top art schools will open for Melyana. This incredible opportunity shouldn't be overlooked.
The smiles on my friends' faces faded. An awkward silence heavily fell. Lindsay was concerned.
It's true,
she insisted.
Melyana can list this competition in her references.
Alba came to the prickly question. Are you ready to tell your parents that you're dropping out of Autonoma University? Lindsay turned her head towards me, now fixing me with hunter-like eyes that screamed, Little liar! Ashamed, I looked away and murmured, No, and I won't do it. I need to put art aside and focus on my future. Penelope tried to reason with me kindly.
But this is what you love doing. You dream of opening a gallery one day.
It's a dream I have to sacrifice to keep my family. I turned back to Lindsay, who seemed unable to understand this choice. In an ironic tone, I summed up my life in a few words. You were the one talking about luxury, beautiful houses, and a perfect world. In that perfect world, I don't have the luxury of choice. The girls can confirm. My parents are not people you can negotiate with. The piercing look in the young woman's eyes softened. It seemed that behind her tough exterior, she was moved by my words. Lindsay looked at my friends, who gave her a sorrowful look. It appeared she had understood. Would she finally leave me alone?
I have to go,
said Lindsay as she stood up.
You still have a few days to think about my offer?
Clearly not. It would take more, obviously, to dissuade her. I pursed my lips and sighed.
You never give up, do you?
My question wasn't really a question. It was more of an observation. Lindsay shrugged and said with a playful air,
The Vega family is looking forward to welcoming you as one of its members.
Then, with a small curtsy, she pivoted on her heel and left as she had come, with all eyes on her. Once she was out of sight, the girls turned on me. Why didn't you tell us anything?
That woman is awesome.
Melia, you should think about it. This contest is a good opportunity.
And what about Diez? That girl said he scared you.
He did not scare me,
I responded, irritated.
He's just a self-centered and obnoxious guy. I never want to see him again.
My voice faded. I grabbed my purse and took out some money to pay for the meal. I just wanted to end this discussion and dissuade my friends from ever bringing it up again. Drawing is just a passion. Nothing more. Let's not talk about Lindsay and her family anymore. I sighed, searching for the right words. Weird? I hissed through my teeth. The girls gave me a worried look before quickly recovering. It was Penelope who finally changed the subject.
Let's go to the house. We can enjoy the pool while we continue our revisions. I still need to complete some flashcards.
Revisions? Groaned Alba. Don't you think of anything else? The exams are only next month. As I gathered my things, I replied, Exactly. We can't afford to waste time. You'll pass, Melia, even without studying. Alba retorted, resigned.
She knows,
her sister pointed out, also rising from the table.
Melia works like crazy to graduate top of her class.
Alba followed us out of the restaurant, continually grumbling. She yearned for something else on this beautiful day, but Penelope and I were not about to let her skip out. Before getting into the car, I sent a message to my mother to inform her of my plans. Even though I knew she wouldn't read it, I preferred to take the initiative to avoid causing her to be in a bad mood later tonight when I returned home. Chapter 6. When I opened the door, my father was already there, seated in the armchair, engrossed in the newspaper. I dropped my things at the entrance and went over to join him. Good evening, I said, trying to sound casual. I settled on the sofa across from him. His neat and elegant appearance lent him an air of natural authority. It was unusual for him to spend the evening at home, and his presence made me nervous. He looked up at me, his piercing blue eyes locking with mine. With a military-like stiffness, he asked,
Did you have a good day?
There was a sparkle in his gaze that prompted me to respond affirmatively. Yes, I had lunch with the girls. Then we went to study at their place.
Alba and Penelope?
I nodded.
I haven't seen them in a while. Are they doing well?
I responded with a broad smile, though my eyes remained empty. I'm going to set the table, I declared, eager to escape my father's scrutinizing gaze.
It's already set. Your mother is warming up dinner in the kitchen.
He closed his newspaper and placed it on the table. The way he then settled back into the chair signaled the start of an interrogation. I held my breath. These rare family moments were unbearable. I closed my eyes for a second to calm my anxiety.
I heard you finally chose the Autonomous University of Barcelona.
Silence. He continued.
That's the best decision you could have made, Melia. I'm relieved your creative energy has finally left you. That wild fancy for drawing couldn't last forever.
My father paused, observing the impact of his words on me. I swallowed the sharp retort that was rising in my throat. My brain was on the verge of exploding. With a knot in my throat, I managed to respond firmly, fearful of revealing my uncertainty. Yes, it was the best choice. There's so much more to life than that.
Exactly.
His tone was cutting.
I'm not asking you to follow in my footsteps, but it's crucial that you don't waste your life on projects, on dreams, that won't give you a future.
I chose to remain silent, not to retaliate. Luckily, my mother called us to the table at that moment.
How did the surgery on the conjoined twins go?
My mother asked. My father replied without a trace of warmth in his eyes.
It was successful.
They continued to discuss work throughout the meal, always with utmost seriousness. When was the last time we all laughed together? I couldn't remember. Lost in my thoughts, I kept my eyes fixed despairingly on the salad bowl in front of me. It felt like heavy chains were binding my neck and the rest of my body. These chains were my parents' expectations. It was best to cut this meal short. I finished eating as quickly as possible, and then stood up from the table, claiming I had a headache. After closing my bedroom door, I leaned my back against it for a few seconds, trying to find as much serenity as possible in the silence. Thankfully, these family dinners were rare. Feeling gloomy, I crossed the room to open the window. The warm air on my face was soothing. I closed my eyes, letting the gentle breeze caress my face. Although night had fallen, Seville was never truly asleep, especially during this time of year. The wind carried snippets of music, shouts, and the sound of honking horns. This urban symphony resonating in the distance helped to dispel the melancholy within me. There was something comforting in knowing that life went on beyond these walls, even when everything seemed dark inside. After spending long minutes at the window reflecting on this life that seemed not to be mine, I decided to take a shower. I was looking forward to doodling in my notebook afterward. Drawing allowed me to release all my bad thoughts, helping me not to go crazy. Like every evening, I hoped tomorrow would be a different day. Chapter 7. The sun had barely risen, yet the heat was already oppressive. My mother's driver was to drop me off a few meters from the high school, right where Alba and Penelope waited for me each morning. Traffic was challenging at this time of the day, with the streets crowded with people heading to work. By some miracle, I arrived a few minutes before classes started. The girls and I hurried to join the entrance of the building with a group of classmates. On this Monday morning, there were a lot of people around us. Some students stayed outside, chatting, in no rush to start their day. Trapped in my school uniform, I tried to hide my discomfort. Underneath my navy blue blazer, my impeccably ironed white shirt was already sticking to my skin. My high socks and pleated skirt, as elegant as they were, only added another layer of discomfort. Our outfits were truly not suited for the summer heat. I was chatting with my friend, Juan, who was planning to spend his vacation at his villa in the Algarve, Portugal.
Hey, come. I've invited the others. There will be lots of things to do.
The girls walked ahead of us. Alba pretended to be engrossed in another conversation with the rest of the group. I knew the feelings she harbored for Juan. It was time to act. I thus embarked on a subtle maneuver to bring them closer together. Maybe. I'll see. I declared a bit louder. I'm going to Crete with my cousins, but before returning to Seville, I might swing by the Algarve with Penelope and Alba. A knowing smile spread across Juan's face, clearly understanding my intent. He played along.
I was indeed planning to invite the twins. They can even come earlier if they'd like. I'd be delighted.
Relieved to have accomplished my mission, I turned my gaze towards the entrance of the high school and grimaced. My heart won't survive this. Climbing these steps in this heat is downright torture.
Want me to carry you?
Offered Zane, another classmate, with a laugh. I laughed. You're crazy. You wouldn't even make it to the 8th step.
You exaggerate.
He protested, laughing.
I think I could make it to the 9th.
Just as I was about to reply, Alba and Penelope turned towards me with that euphoric expression on their faces that I had learned to be wary of. I frowned.
Your friend is there,
Alba said in a high-pitched voice. My friend? What fries? My face fell. My heart sank as I spotted Lindsay, at the other end, at the bottom of the steps, leaning against her conspicuously flashy Camaro. Hell and damnation. This woman was the devil. Would she follow me like this every day for the rest of my life?
You know this girl?
Juan asked, concerned. I cast a desperate look around before returning to him and putting on a broad, forced smile to save face. No! Yes, she gave me a ride the other night. I explained, trying to appear as nonchalant as possible. It's a long story. Anyway, I must have left something in her car. I quickly moved away from the group. Go on. I'll catch up with you in class. Occupied with flipping through a notebook with blank pages, Lindsay didn't look up as I approached her slowly.
What are you doing in front of my high school? This is turning into harassment. Besides, you can't park here. You're going to get me in trouble.
My face was animated with fury. Lindsay finally looked up, feigning ignorance of her predicament.
Mierda. I must have had another sleepwalking episode. Or maybe it was fate that brought me here early this morning.
I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the curious glances at us. Her words were not amusing. I was fed up.
Lindsay, I haven't changed my mind and I'm not going back on my decision.
I know.
Good, then leave me alone.
She pushed herself off from the car and stood up straight.
You're afraid of disappointing your parents, afraid of taking a different path, afraid for your pristine reputation.
Growing more irritated, I glared at her with all the fury my dark eyes could muster. Since last Saturday night, she had already exhausted all my patience. I gritted my teeth.
You came here for nothing! Go back home!
With an annoyed air, Lindsay tilted her head to the right and then to the left.
Actually, I need your help. Don't worry, it's not about the contest.
With a sideways glance, I signaled for her to continue. Just listening to her might get her to leave me alone, at least for today. She tore a page from her notebook and handed it to me. On it was drawn a majestic eagle in a pop rock style. It was a beautiful drawing.
My client doesn't like my eagle. I spent all of Sunday drawing it and then sent it to her by email. This snob thinks my eagle isn't aggressive enough, too smooth, not royale enough.
I could hear the animosity in her voice. Lindsay wasn't one to take criticism lightly.
Can you try to see if you can fix it? I need it by Thursday evening at the latest.
Rather than being taken aback, she preferred to turn this problem to her advantage. I could see exactly what she was trying to do. I looked around me. The schoolyard was emptying out. I was about to refuse when I caught sight of Antonio and his gang passing not far from us. His vaguely contemptuous expression, so characteristic of him, was infuriating. The little bastard had left me stranded by the roadside without a second thought for my fate. I was fuming. The desire to put him in his place overwhelmed me.
Antonio!
I called out with all my might. The moron pretended not to notice me, not surprising coming from him.
Hey, cabron!
I insisted. All heads turned towards us. Antonio said a few words to the guys he was with, and then approached me with a nonchalant gait, a stupid smile at the corner of his mouth.
Still looking for me, sweetheart?
He asked with a warm voice, glancing briefly at Lindsay. I grimaced, disgusted, before retorting,
I know you'll take pleasure in twisting the truth because you can't stand the idea that a girl could reject you. So, what are you going to tell your little buddies, that you screwed me in your car before abandoning me on the sidewalk?
With an air of arrogance, Antonio straightened his shoulders, puffed out his chest, and plunged his hands into his navy blue trousers.
Maybe so.
He moved closer to me and whispered,
But I won't tell if you give me a blowjob in the school bathroom later.
I pushed him away with all my strength, shooting him a piercing glare, and responded in a dry tone.
I prefer the first version, the one where you screwed me. And don't worry, I won't deny it. I'll go even further and tell everyone that after you broke down, you started whining like a baby. You then confessed to me that your mother had breastfed you until you were 8, and that because of this, you'd never been able to develop your Oedipus complex. Now, to get a proper hard-on, you had to be spanked. So that's what I did, calling you every name in the book. Today my hand still hurts. In the end, I thought I'd had the best fuck of my life, but it was the worst.
Antonio scrutinized me, puzzled. His cheeks began to flush, but he had no appropriate comeback.
No one will believe such a crazy story, Ortega. You're completely...
He didn't have the courage to finish his sentence. I raised my chin to emphasize my threat. His pretense of grandeur vanished. Flustered, Antonio stammered,
You're a crazy lunatic. What's wrong with you?
He dared to glance timidly at Lindsay, and immediately regretted it. Without a moment's hesitation, he turned and rejoined his group of friends, with less assurance. I watched him until his figure disappeared at the top of the stairs. Proud of myself, I turned back to Lindsay, who was looking at me with undisguised amusement.
I thought rich kids never bit. You're starting to appeal to me.
I was about to turn back to go to class, but she stopped me once again.
So, do you think you can help me with this cursed eagle?
I looked at the torn page she was holding out to me.
Come on, Melyana. I promise my brother won't be there that day. Plus, I'll give you half the pay for this job. I bet you've never worked to earn your own money. Contrary to what you think, it's quite rewarding to be free.
Free? That word resonated within me as if it were the cure for everything. At that moment, a strange sensation enveloped me. I felt almost alive. Looking Lindsay in the eyes, I took the torn page in my hand and folded it to put it away for later. I can try, I declared with an exasperated sigh. I turned around and hurried up the steps so as not to be late for class. Diez art tattoo at Los Pajaritos. Lindsay shouted after me, afraid I might have forgotten the tattoo parlor's address. A few minutes later, I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on Mrs. Coronado's philosophy class. The endless minutes stretched on. I glanced around me. Many of my classmates were struggling to keep their attention on the monotonous discourse echoing in the silent classroom. Some, like Juan, were nodding off. Others were discreetly tapping away on their phone keyboards. Normally, I was a diligent student, thirsty for knowledge. But today, a much stronger desire drove me. As my nails tapped on the table, I stared at the folded sheet next to me. The urge to open it grew with each passing second. Nervously, I buried my head in my hands, closed my eyes, and counted to infinity to resist this overpowering force. No, 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 Melia. Lindsay is testing you. Don't give in. Mrs. Coronado's words mixed in my mind as the class seemed to dissolve. I felt sweat trickling down my back. Throughout the class, I forced myself not to start scribbling in my notebook all the ideas that were emerging from my imagination. Penelope's voice made me jump. The world had just started spinning again.
Are you sure everything's okay?
Alba asked, concerned. Lost, I looked around and noticed that the classroom was almost empty. Yes, I replied, hurriedly gathering my things. That class was endless. I zoned out for a moment. The girls exchanged worried glances. Alba touched my forehead as if to check my temperature and shook her head. I told you I'm fine. That class was just unbearably boring. I hurried out of the classroom.
Melia, this isn't like you.
Penelope insisted.
Is it Lindsay? Did something go wrong this morning?
I stopped in the middle of the crowded hallway and turned back to Alba and Penelope. I was about to invent a lie before backtracking and choosing honesty. Her. Ever since I met this girl, nothing's been right. She shows up one day in my life and disrupts my well-organized daily routine. I had finally accepted putting my passion, my dreams behind me, giving up on my art studies. What do I do now? My voice trailed off at the end of that question. After pouring my heart out, I found it hard to breathe. My desperate gaze shifted between my two friends. I saw a smile beginning to form on their faces, which then blossomed more widely.
Do it, Melia!
Alba encouraged, her eyes shining with excitement. I rolled my eyes.
Damn it, we only have one life.
Her sister chimed in. I can't, I exclaimed. Penelope firmly grabbed my arm to make me look at her.
If you restrain your talent, it will transform into a harmful venom. This venom will consume you from the inside. Do you want to be angry and bitter all your life? This gift can either save you or destroy you. It's up to you.
I knew she was right, but the stakes were too high. I pulled away from Penelope's grip. I'm not ready to lose everything, I whispered before turning around and heading towards the classroom where we had class. My steps echoed in the entrance. The door's click behind me left a muffled silence in its wake, enveloping the soothing atmosphere of the house. My gaze quickly scanned the surroundings, searching for signs of my parents' presence. No jacket or bag, no one on the phone, no news channel on the living room television. Just a note on the table. I recognized my mother's delicate calligraphy. She informed me that she would be home late, and that my father was once again on hospital duty. Nothing out of the ordinary. A discreet smile stretched across my lips. Tonight, I was free from all constraints, from all moralizing speeches. I wouldn't have had the courage to listen to my parents' rigid expectations, explaining how important it was to conform to high society's standards. A shiver of excitement ran through me. I left the note on the table and headed to my room. Every step I took brought me closer to imminent liberation. I had fought all day against this irresistible urge to open Lindsay's sheet. This urge to start drawing had been devouring me for the past few hours. I approached the window and drew the curtains to let in the last rays of sunlight. A soft orange light spread into the room, reaching my desk, which seemed to invite me to take a seat and start working. I took out my notebook and Lindsay's torn page from my belongings and sat down. For a moment, I contemplated every millimeter of this drawing. This eagle was perfect. More regal, more aggressive, the client had asked for. I closed my eyes, let my imagination trace the lines in the void. In the greatest mess, the bird slowly took shape in my mind until it was fully formed. I opened my eyes, took a pencil. I was ready to bring this artistic project to life. Chapter 8. As I entered, the music was blasting loudly in the entrance, just like last time. Standing behind the counter, Lindsay looked surprised to see me at the tattoo parlor in the late afternoon. A slight mix of excitement and apprehension had been with me since I woke up this morning. Determined to meet the challenge she had given me 3 days ago, I had devoted all my evenings to creating this design.
Hey,
she said, placing a cardboard box on the counter.
I completely forgot about you. Is it already Thursday?
I dodged the question, knowing full well she had been waiting for me for hours, and declared hastily, I don't have much time, so let's get to it. My gaze swept the room to make sure we were alone and he wasn't there. Then I approached Lindsay to give her what she had asked for. With an impatient gesture, she grabbed the sheet I handed her and hurried to uncover the griffin I had drawn. Her reaction was immediate. She stepped back slightly, visibly astonished. Her lips parted slowly.
Mierda,
she breathed, lowering the volume of the stereo. She tilted her head left and then right to better observe the details.
It seems ready to fly off the paper. It's incredible,
Lindsay commented, still keeping her eyes fixed on the griffin.
It's claws, those shaded areas. All the details look so real.
The words from Lindsay, filled with wonder, resonated within me like a divine deliverance. I let out the breath caught in my throat. The young woman then lifted her face to mine.
I understand now what my client meant. Next to this, my eagle looks ridiculous. Mierda! Why didn't I think of the griffin before?
I looked up and scanned the walls. Among all the drawings hanging there, some were hers. They were all magnificent. You would have eventually succeeded. You have much more talent than me, I replied absent-mindedly. Lindsay set the sheet aside and rested her forearms on the counter, She looked at me with a smirk.
Admit it, you enjoyed that, didn't you?
I shrugged and sighed. I love drawing. It's no secret.
Melia, stop. Admit you enjoyed this challenge. I'm sure you'd love to see your griffin on my client's shoulder when I'm done tattooing it.
There she goes again. I shook my head and stepped away from the counter. I know what you're trying to do, Lindsay, but I'm done. This was a one-time thing for me. Besides, I want the money you promised me. I held out my hand. Lindsay burst out laughing, and then pulled out a brown envelope from under the counter and brought it to me. Her minimalist outfit, like her torn fishnet tights, didn't catch my eye today. I only saw a passionate artist.
Listen, Melia, about the contest.
And a tenacious woman. I rolled my eyes and opened my mouth, but she beat me to it by waving her hands wildly.
I know. You don't want to hear about it. But we've crossed a threshold together. We've collaborated and you had a blast. I'm proposing that just once, you hold a machine in your hands and feel what it's like. Maybe you'd like it?
Her question hung in the air. I wasn't sure anymore what I wanted. Lindsay stared at me for a long time, trying to discern something that hinted at a glimmer of hope. At that moment, her entire life seemed to hang on my lips. Hesitant, I shook my head slightly and stammered, maybe. The noise of the door behind me prevented me from finishing my sentence. Lindsay's face fell. Worried, I turned abruptly and saw Josh enter, followed by Diez and a man in his 30s with a long red beard, dressed just as stylishly and rock and roll as the other three. I paled and prayed to become invisible. While Josh greeted me timidly from afar, Diez looked me up and down before returning his attention to his sister. He seemed tense and exhausted. I turned back to Lindsay and stared at her, not understanding. You said he wouldn't be here, I whispered to her. With a sigh that betrayed her lack of enthusiasm, she replied,
Apparently, his schedule changed.
What is she doing here?
The way the demon man asked that question made it seem like a repugnant poison had crossed his lips.
Melia. Her name is Melia.
His sister corrected him.
And I'm asking her once again to come join our team.
I gave her a stern look, urging her to be quiet. Lindsay was getting me into situations I had no desire to be in.
She can leave. If you want to learn how to sew or drink tea, you can go with her.
My heart rose to my throat. I fought against the anger rising within me. Lindsay cursed under her breath before roaring,
Fuck off, Diez. Do you want to win this contest or not?
Not with that kind of girl.
That kind of girl? Exasperated, I turned to this guy and glared at him.
Melia has more talent in drawing than anyone else. You're not giving her. You're not giving us any chance.
Here's Mario, a tattoo artist from Madrid. He's going to come work with us to train for the Tiger Cup. He's good. I told you I was going to find someone to replace Mandy.
Lindsay stepped menacingly toward her brother.
I don't want Mario!
My eyes landed on Josh, as embarrassed as the aforementioned Mario. Diez raised his voice.
The world of tattooing needs much more than talent. It's a world, a way of life, different customs from the high society this girl lives in. Look at her, Lindsay. She looks like your baby doll you had when you were a kid. She's a caricature in herself.
His words hit home. I, in turn, walked towards this detestable guy, my face distorted with rage.
Fuck you! I won't let myself be insulted without saying anything by someone who needs to cover their body in tattoos to hide. It's you who's the caricature. I'm happy not to resemble you.
Fortunately, the music filled the silence that followed. Diez nodded his head. A hint of a smile curved his lips, making him insolently charming. I found this combination strange and unpleasant at the same time. Uncomfortable. I looked away toward the door that I wanted to reach as quickly as possible to get out of here.
Resemble you?
Repeated Diez, almost amused.
Baby doll is spicy.
My eyes narrowed into 2 small slits.
More than you think,
his sister affirmed, crossing her arms over her chest. Josh decided to intervene.
There's no point in debating further. Melia has already declined Lindsay's proposal, and Diez has found a new teammate. Let's get back to work now.
I agree with you.
His brother conceded, in a harsh voice.
Lindsay, say goodbye to Baby Doll and don't linger. Mario needs us to explain how the shop operates.
Without adding anything, he passed into the next room. Josh and Mario followed him without a word. Lindsay put her hand on her forehead and closed her eyes with an infinitely tired expression.
I'm sorry, Melia. My brother is sometimes clumsy.
I raised an eyebrow.
Clumsy? That's an understatement. I hate him.
Before he arrived, you were going to accept joining our team? Don't deny it. I could feel it.
I raised a hand in the air, looked away, and took the time to choose my words. Lindsay, your brother has found someone else. It's good news that works out for everyone. I'm glad to have met you. I gave her a faint smile and hurried towards the exit. Once again, Lindsay caught up with me. She grabbed my shoulder and forced me to turn around.
Registration's close tomorrow at 10 p.m. at the Dragdale. Diez and the whole group will be there to have drinks. I'll wait for you there so you can sign this damn form.
I quickly pulled away. Goodbye, Lindsay. As the door closed behind me, I was first overwhelmed by a wave of relief, then by anger and disappointment. Damn it. What was wrong with me? Chapter 9. The week was finally coming to an end. During the last hour of class, I tried to stay focused, pushing aside the negative thoughts that had haunted me since last night. It had been almost a week since my strange encounter with Lindsay. That girl had stirred up more chaos in a few days than the past 18 years combined. Moving past this whole contest debacle was the best thing to do to regain peace in my daily life and forget Diez. Especially Diez, that detestable guy. At that thought, my jaw tensed and my fingers tightened around my pencil. All day I had put on a brave face, hiding my emotions behind a forced smile. No one needed to know how deeply the harsh words of Lindsay's brother had impacted my self-esteem and confidence. His arrogance had struck me right in the heart, questioning my artistic skills and talent. I wanted nothing more to do with that family. It was time for me to come back down to earth and focus on what really mattered to me, my future. The bell signaling the end of classes rang, filling me with relief. As I packed my things into my bag, I felt lighter, as if I could finally breathe again. The thought of heading to the Comet tonight with my friends excited me. I loved roller skating at that complex, a favorite hangout for Seville's youth. I hurried to join Penelope at her table. She was just finishing writing something in her planner. I'm going to swing by my house to change. Then I'll meet you at yours. My friend quickly got up and packed her things.
Don't bother,
she replied.
You can shower at our place, and we'll lend you some clothes.
Then she turned to me with a wide smile and exclaimed,
Tonight's going to do us some good. Let's forget about that exam and the studying for a while.
We headed towards the exit, eager to meet our friends in front of the school.
Miss Ortega, can you stay for a minute? I need to speak with you.
The calm voice of Mrs. Garcia, our Spanish teacher and head teacher, stopped me just as I was about to leave the classroom. Surprised, I turned back to her and retraced my steps.
I'll wait outside,
Penelope whispered, curious about what Mrs. Garcia wanted from me. When the classroom was finally empty, my teacher leaned against the desk. She was an elegant woman in her 40s. Despite the stifling heat of May, she had managed to keep her hair in a neat hairstyle. She wore a light flowing dress with floral patterns, giving her a refined and summery look. After taking a deep breath, Mrs. Garcia began to speak in a soft, caring voice.
Melyana, throughout the year, I've observed your exceptional talent, determination, and perseverance. You are undoubtedly one of the brightest students in your class, and your academic achievements are remarkable,
she declared, always with an encouraging smile. I had worked hard to achieve these results. It was gratifying to see my perseverance recognized by my head teacher. However, her words soon took an unexpected turn.
That's why the teaching staff and the school director think you deserve to give the speech at the end of your graduation ceremony.
I was stunned, my eyes fixed on her. I had not expected this proposal at all. I could already imagine the joy on my parents' faces that day. I'm deeply honored by your offer. It's a privilege, I stammered. I feel fortunate to have been chosen among all the senior students. Mrs. Garcia waved her hand in the air and laughed.
We didn't really have any other names in mind. The other students are incurable dreamers and unpredictable. With you, we're not taking any risks. We know you're programmed to do what's asked of you, which is to be the best.
I wondered if her remark was meant as a compliment. No one seemed to realize the essential emptiness inside me I couldn't fill. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. I was at a loss for words. How could I explain to Mrs. Garcia I was much more than just a brilliant student? That I wanted to live a life full of surprises? A shadow of weariness crossed my face. My teacher noticed my expression and quickly backtracked.
You are much more than a brilliant student, Melyana. You've excellently filled the role of president of the student organizations for the past 3 years. Few people are as well liked as you in this institution. You always think of others before yourself.
Perhaps that was the problem, I thought to myself. It was impossible for me to break free from this label of predictability, from this image of a model student. Without losing her smile, Mrs. Garcia straightened up and let her arms fall to her sides.
Enjoy your weekend,
she concluded.
You can go celebrate this good news with your friends.
I thanked her and left the classroom, my eyes blurred with tears I was holding back. Upon arriving at the Comet, I was determined to forget everything and just have fun. The bright lights flashed in sync with the music that filled the air as I glided along the rink. This Friday night outing was exactly what I needed to shake off my gloom. Juan, Pablo, Alba, Penelope, and the others were all there. We had made a pact not to talk about exams, results, or future plans. We just wanted to enjoy the moment. Our laughter rose into the air as we took to the rink, skillfully dodging other skaters. My friends went all out, performing twirls and impromptu stunts. I was swept up by their boundless energy, quickly forgetting my troubled thoughts. I let myself go, allowing my body to move freely and skated passionately, not hesitating to speed up on the tight turns to catch up with Pablo and Alba. These carefree moments were so rare I wanted to etch them into my memory. Penelope grabbed my hand as I weaved through the crowd.
Look! Alba and Juan are getting closer!
She yelled. I slowed down and looked ahead. Indeed, Juan was playfully skating with Alba, trying to unbalance her by holding her in his arms. I turned to Penelope with a triumphant smile. "Our Cupid mission is finally complete," I exclaimed, raising my arms to the sky. Then I took Penelope by the hands, and we started spinning around faster and faster in a circle, our screams blending with laughter. It was risky because if one of us let go, we would be propelled into the scenery. Caught up in the moment's euphoria, we didn't care. That's when the word "tiger" on a yellow banner beneath the DJ's booth caught my eye. Penelope and I kept spinning, but I slowed down to eventually make out the word "tattoo." I continued to slow down gently. The word "cup" eventually deflated the enthusiasm I had felt just moments before. I stopped dead in my tracks under the banner, my head spinning. Even though the words danced before my eyes, I could read what was written in full. Barcelona hosts the 5th edition of the largest international tattoo contest, the Tiger Cup. It felt like a short circuit in my brain.
Is this what Lindsay was talking about?
I turned to Penelope and shrugged. Yes, I think so. To avoid continuing to block the path on the rink, I headed to the side and leaned against the railing, followed by my friend.
You said no, but you wanted to participate.
She insisted. No, I didn't want to join their team at all. Penelope looked at me, skeptical. She did not seem convinced by my words.
I know you well enough, Melia, to see your eyes say otherwise.
Clearly not, I grumbled. I turned my head and glanced at the banner again, before adding in a tone that betrayed my disappointment. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. They've found someone as odd as them to complete their team. They don't need me anymore.
So, you erase all your dreams that easily? Drawing? Is it over? Are you going to become the brilliant lawyer your mother dreams of?
I crossed my arms, signaling to Penelope that she needed to elaborate.
Mierda! Do the contest! You have nothing to lose. And so what if you fail? At least you'll have no regrets. Come on, don't turn the page now.
I threw my head back and stared at the immensely high ceiling. I feel lost, I declared in a weary voice before turning back to Penelope.
Is today the deadline for registration?
I nodded slowly and added with a troubled expression, 10 p.m. My friend's reaction was immediate. She grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the exit of the rink.
Okay, we have 45 minutes to avoid the riots in town and find Lindsay.
Are you crazy, Penelope? Let go of me.
No way am I letting you miss out on your happiness.
I managed to break free just before we exited the rink. I can't! I can't! I yelled, trying to reason with her. Penelope turned toward me, her expression fierce, making me step back slightly. She looked suddenly very upset with me. Gently, she brought her face close to mine and asked through clenched teeth,
Do you remember that girl who gave up?
I widened my eyes. What? Who was she talking about? I shook my head vigorously.
Of course, you don't remember her. Nobody remembers her. Do you want to be that girl, Melia?
Her harsh but necessary words felt like a punch in the gut. No, I don't want to be.
Then, get moving.
I nodded and decided to make a 180-degree turn.
What's the address?
Penelope asked, her features still hardened by anger. The Dragdale.
Great. Book an Uber.
Without another word, she turned and left the rink. I hurried to follow her, my fingers already tapping on my phone. Chapter 10. We arrived at the address Lindsay had given me. The Dragdale was a rock-themed pub, bustling with people. The electric, deafening music was shattering my ears. Standing at the entrance, lost, I felt curious glances scrutinizing Penelope and me from head to toe. Our polished appearance did not allow us to blend in with this crowd of heavily styled, pierced and tattooed individuals.
Melya, look at this.
Penelope shouted into my ear, trying to drown out the blaring music.
It's so different from what we're used to.
After quickly scanning the place, I took a deep breath to muster some courage. Then I made my way determinedly toward the far end of the bar. My friend moved closer to me and yelled that it wouldn't be easy to find Lindsay in the midst of all these people. She was right. We didn't have much time left. We needed to hurry. I elbowed my way through the crowd, making a path while craning my neck to spot a flash of green hair. The air was charged with frenetic energy, and the dimmed lights heightened the euphoric atmosphere that pervaded the place. Around me, colorful individuals gyrated on an impromptu dance floor. Bikers, goths, and eccentric artists flaunted their unique physiques. The Dragdale was a true melting pot of styles and personalities I had never encountered before. Faces flashed by. Some wore serious, threatening expressions, while others sported joyful smiles, inviting us to join them.
There she is!
Penelope suddenly exclaimed, pointing upwards. I quickly followed her gaze. Lindsay, Josh, and their brother were sitting with a group in an elevated corner overlooking the pub. I furrowed my brows, recalling the moments of tension and confrontation with Diez. This time, I was determined not to be intimidated by the demon man. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the crowd, resolved not to turn back. I arrived upstairs where the music was less overpowering. As I got closer to the group, about 15 strong, my heart raced faster. It felt like I had taken a heavy dose of adrenaline. Keep going, keep going. I repeated to myself to muster the courage to advance. The heads had barely turned towards us when Lindsay had already jumped to her feet upon seeing me approach and screamed excitedly,
"You came! Damn, I can't believe it!"
She almost threw herself at me, but hesitated at the last second. Overwhelmed with excitement, she couldn't keep still.
"I want to introduce you to Melyana and her friend."
Lindsay turned towards Penelope, who introduced herself shyly. Then she continued enthusiastically.
"Melyana is a designer, and she's going to join us for the Tiger Cup."
The group's scrutinizing looks mixed curiosity with doubt. They were mostly older men and women. Unlike Lindsay, they seemed perplexed by the announcement, as if I was an outsider in their world. Some exchanged whispers, while others stared at me as if I were a curiosity. I suddenly felt uncomfortable, acutely aware of my appearance and clothing, which did not match their rebellious aesthetic. Penelope, standing back, looked as if she suddenly questioned what we were doing here. Like me, she felt out of place.
"What are you waiting for? Welcome them,"
Lindsay chided.
"I've found a gem from Seville. You'll soon be begging her to design your tattoos. The Vanity Bay Griffin. That was her."
I started to see warm smiles and signs of acceptance among the group members. The mention of the griffin seemed to have made an impression. I let out a sigh of relief. A step had been taken. Although the atmosphere around us was becoming more relaxed, I carefully avoided Diez's heavy and menacing gaze. I knew he was there, sitting in the shadows, watching me with all the hatred he could muster. Josh stood up to greet us, clearly pleased to see me.
"Hey, Melyana. So you're really going for it? That's awesome."
I buried my hands in the back pockets of my jeans and returned his smile. "Looks like it." Actually, it was Penelope who finally convinced me. When Lindsay's brother turned his head towards my friend, his eyes widened. I noticed a slight shift in his demeanor as if the world around him had disappeared. I furrowed my brows and slowly pivoted towards Penelope. With a budding smile, she greeted him timidly. A sparkle of curiosity mixed with evident attraction shone in her eyes. My eyes narrowed as I saw her cheeks blush. Was it just me, or was there an undeniable connection forming between them? I shook my head, puzzled, then turned to Lindsay, who was hiding her smile behind her hand. She seemed highly amused by the situation. When she caught my eye, I sent her a glare to make it clear that Josh better not get too close to Penelope. At that moment, a confident young man with an angular face called out to us.
"What can I get you girls to drink?"
I was about to order a mojito, but a chilling voice cut me off.
The Dragdale doesn't serve baby bottles. Maybe they should go party with the good kids their age.
My jaw clenched. The demon man had emerged from his shadow. My eyes slowly lifted to meet his. Seated alone in the background, he radiated a dangerous aura. Lindsay's brother seemed both distant and present, observing the world with an imperturbable attitude. His natural charisma gave him the air of a leader, drawing the attention of everyone around him.
Diez.
I greeted him, hoping to ease the tension between us. A sneer of contempt twisted Diez's features, and he took a long swig from his beer bottle before declaring with a condescending air,
"My sister doesn't have the final say on who's part of our team. I'm struggling to understand her obsession with a girl like you who's never even touched a coil in her life."
"Fuck you, Diez!"
Lindsay interjected furiously. Her brother stood up. He looked down on me with disdain before turning his eyes, full of challenge and anger, towards his sister. Around us, no one else dared to move or speak.
The choice isn't yours to make, Lindsay.
I trust my instincts. You haven't given Melyana a chance. I refuse to be part of a competition that's turning into a dictatorship. You can't impose anything on me.
Diez raised his voice.
So, you're willing to crash and burn for a girl who knows nothing about the tattoo world and who lives in a world of privilege. She doesn't have the basics, the physique, nor the shoulders for this, Lindsay.
Driven solely by a desire for hatred, he was eager to see me out of his sister's life. This guy was really getting on my nerves. Caught in a wave of anger, I stepped forward. I couldn't help myself. I had to respond.
Fine. It's between Mario and me then. Set up a contest to decide. Challenge us. Whoever wins gets officially entered in the Tiger Cup.
Next to me, Lindsay whistled in approval before adding,
"That's a brilliant idea. I'm all for it."
"Me too,"
said Josh.
"At least there'll be no more arguing after this."
The group members exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. My suggestion seemed to be approved by everyone except for Diez, who stared at me unblinkingly. His gaze was as cold as liquid nitrogen. He turned to his sister.
"We don't have time to play with baby doll."
He snapped with a disapproving glance.
"All the more reason to settle our disagreement as quickly as possible."
Diez glared at Lindsay, and then suppressed a snort of disdain.
1 week,
he growled, pointing his index finger downwards. His sister crossed her arms over her chest and tilted her chin up towards him.
"I want 2 weeks,"
she negotiated.
"And with the rotary machine."
Diez shook his head.
10 days with the cartridge machine. 1 week with the rotary machine. Your choice. Take it or leave it.
Lindsay stared at him for a few seconds, seemingly weighing her options. Diez tilted his head to the side, questioning his sister with his eyes. Finally, it was Josh who decided.
10 days.
With his jaw clenched, Diez regarded his brother with a suspicious eye. The atmosphere suddenly charged with electric tension. I held my breath until a sarcastically filled female voice resonated behind me.
Have these 2 lost sheep strayed?
I turned to her. A young woman with a slender and tall silhouette walked past us confidently toward Diez, her high heels echoing on the floor. My eyes swept over her from head to toe. She was dressed in a tight-fitting black leather outfit that showcased her numerous tattoos. The zipper of her top descended to her navel, revealing as much of her chest as possible. Each movement, every gesture was calculated to draw attention to herself. The woman, with gray eyes, rested her forearm on Diez's shoulder and scanned the group before fixing her dark gaze on me. Her lips, outlined in sharp black, formed a smug smile that instilled a feeling of discomfort in me. Her long platinum blonde hair framed her face, highlighting her bold makeup that emphasized her provocative side. Her appearance was both intimidating and seductive, a confusing mix of beauty and vulgarity.
"Did you bring your bitch?"
she asked Diez, continuing to glare at me defiantly. My face froze. I raised my eyebrows, puzzled. Had I really heard the words that just came out of her mouth? Snickers rose from the group. An explosive tension built between her and me. On edge, I snapped back.
"I'm not his bitch! You're welcome to that title!"
I retorted, furious. Lindsay's hand on my shoulder stopped me from going further. She leaned in to whisper in my ear.
Melyana. The bitch is the name Diez gave to his bike.
What? I shook my head. It didn't surprise me that he would give such a ridiculous name to a machine. The woman burst into spiteful laughter.
"Feeling stupid all of a sudden?"
Shut up, Eva,
Lindsay interjected. Penelope joined me, her claws out, ready to defend. Diez removed his girlfriend's arm from his shoulder and went back to sit down. His hard features still reflected an elusive demeanor. After giving me one last look, Ava followed him and straddled him. She then buried her head in the crook of his neck. I couldn't help but sense the toxic bond between them. A destructive attraction, especially from the young woman toward this rebellious man with an untamed heart.
Good grief! Who is this slut?
Penelope exclaimed.
I was about to jump on her.
Lindsay grabbed her beer and came back to us. Josh, who had stayed by our side, answered.
That's Ava, Paz's little sister. They're competing with their team in the Tiger Cup. They're our most formidable rivals.
Rivals? I turned my head toward the couple who were unabashedly making out at the other end of the square.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe,
said Josh, seemingly reading my thoughts.
If they're together, why aren't they on the same team?
Penelope asked, also finding it hard to believe in this tale of rivalry. Lindsay burst into a harsh, somewhat spiteful laugh.
They're not together. Eva is just my brother's #1 fling. She likes to mark her territory and doesn't let any other women near him when she's around.
I could hear in Lindsay's voice all the contempt she held for Eva, as well as her intent to demean her. She took a sip of her beer, then changed the subject.
Okay, let's go see Brady. We're going to get you registered for the contest and put your name next to Mario's.
I nodded, happy to get as far away as possible from Diez and the demon woman. Penelope was about to follow us when Josh held her back.
Can I get you a drink while my sister and your friend take care of the paperwork?
I stopped dead in my tracks and looked at Penelope. She blinked, taken aback.
I'm not sure.
She stammered. She turned to me. I gave her a warning look, but Josh was quick to persuade her.
There are tables available downstairs. The Dragdale makes the best cocktails in all of Seville.
Penelope bit her lip, torn. I had never seen her like this before. The attraction between them was unmistakable. When she finally agreed, Josh's face lit up even more. Lindsay sighed, rolled her eyes, then pulled me by the arm to follow her.
Arf. My brothers are incorrigible.